maybe a flirt at times and whatnot, trying to be a ladies' man. He's probably arguably one of the most reliable members of the returners in Final Fantasy VI. And when you have someone who's technically a king of a nation fighting in your the front lines, you can't hit. Not only does that give you a morale boost, but it just proves that even royals can be all out offensive and powerful in a sense. And sometimes it's not always actual physical strength. Sometimes it's also their intellect that also contributes to that strength. In Edgar's case, being a machinist and responsible for overseeing much of Figaro's mechanical revolution and technology in the world of Final Fantasy VI, he definitely lives up to his title being a machinist, and he also contributes a lot to much of this game. Hi folks, this is RotorStorm331, back to doing some more guides for Final Fantasy VI. I hope everyone enjoyed the Sabin guide that I posted the other day. Today we're going to be focusing on the eldest twin of the Figaro twins, Edgar Roni Figaro, and he's going to be the focus of this guide today. Today we're going to be going an overview of this character in addition to strengths, weaknesses, skills, final equipment options, as well as what stats to prioritize for him when leveling up. And there are some parts where they are scripted, but a good chunk of them is not. So if I screw up on that, that's my apology. My apologies ahead of time. But then again, I'm not a very good speaker. But if you do understand what I'm trying to say, then good for you. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So when it comes to Edgar in this game, he's more of a physical attacker, even though Sabin's probably the better of the two. But Edgar's probably more the dedicated physical fighter of the two twins. And this is mostly due to the fact of his stats. Of course, what you see here is not exactly the initial stats he begins with, because I've been building that up pretty nicely and all. But overall, Edgar is pretty much one of your better physical fighters, probably one of the more dedicated fighters. That's more or less thanks to his personal skill tools, and the fact that he gets a large amount of weapons. In my opinion, he's probably more the jack of all trades. Usually characters like that are capable of doing multiple stuff usually wind up on the weaker end of the spectrum, but in Edgar's case, he's pretty much capable of doing multiple roles in general. For one, he can become your Dragoon aside from Mog. His tools give him a multiple variety of attack options, and he also gets access to some very powerful gear, namely in terms of weapons, like not only Radiant Lance and Holy Lance, but he can also equip Ragnarok and Luminia, which are two of the game's most powerful swords, as well as Ultimate Weapon. So Edgar has a lot of pretty good weapon options, and he is probably one of your better offensive fighters in general. But of course, like with all characters, he does have notable weaknesses. For one, he has pretty poor evasion because of the fact that he's mostly locked to heavy armor, and he doesn't really get a whole lot of armor options that boost up his stats quite a bit, which is kind of a key thing for a lot of the party members in Final Fantasy VI, because those added stats, in addition to the ones you gain through level up through equipping Espers, can really help turn the tide and get you more added damage that you would not normally get on normal playthrough-wise. But overall, Edgar is just pretty powerful. His magic side is kind of subpar, even though his starting magic stat is 29, which is higher than his twin brother Sabin and Zetzer and Locke, but it's still on the low side when you consider things in general, especially wielding spells and magic and using Bioblaster and Flash, but he could still deal quite a hefty bit of damage. His tools, unfortunately, do start falling off by the time players get into World of Ruin, but they could still be serviceable. Otherwise, like Drill, Chainsaw, Auto Crossbow being one of them. If you want magical damage, Flash could be useful. Poison for Bioblaster if you need it. But a lot of his tools can come in handy in certain situations when they really do count towards. And once you come to know what Edgar can do, you can decide what route he should definitely go. But he's definitely more the physical fighter of the two twins than Sabin is, since Sabin's blitzes require magic for his. But Edgar should definitely prioritize strength most of all in general, but it's not a bad idea to give him more speed, since he's tied with Gogo with having an initial 30 speed. In regards to his other stats, just as a quick rundown, he's tied with Shadow for having 39 strength, which makes him 5th strongest in the returners along with Shadow. He's tied for having the third lowest speed in the game of 30 with Gogo. Of course, in Edgar's case, he can definitely improve that through level ups with Odin and Raiden Espers in the Pixel Remaster version, as well as Quetzal. Stamina, he has 34. Magic at 29. His HP gains on level up are 49. MP gain for at least 6. So overall, Edgar's probably one of your more go-to physical fighters, but unfortunately his tools do take a nosedive by the time World of Ruin occurs, but if you do prioritize getting his strength up to his speed, he could do a lot more damage overall with his drill and chainsaw and even auto crossbow if it's further amped up than what you see right here. But overall, Edgar's just got too many things going for him, but at the same time, it's also something that works against him as well because some of the lances do not give him 3 times damage boost, which can somewhat hurt. Partisan might be a good weapon for him if you want to have him to deal the 3 times damage, but on the other hand, the lance I got him equipped with gives him like a good strength boost upgrade. And it really kind of hurts that Edgar just doesn't really have a whole lot of armor stat boosting options. Not to mention his evasion and magic evasion are pretty terrible at most. So if you want to prioritize getting his evasion up, giving him accessory relics like Cypher Cape and White Cape are definitely must-haves for him. If you want to improve that, or give him better armor options. Because unfortunately his armor options for stat gains mostly include Jinjai armor, Red Jacket, and even Regal Crown, which are considerably noble options for stat gains for Edgar. But overall, Edgar is just pretty darn good overall, and he stays, like his twin brother Sabin, he remains pretty much useful throughout the entire game. Not to mention he's required to beat the game with, being your third or second party member, depending whether or not you decide to get his twin brother Sabin back on board. And he's also the third party member that joins up in the World of Balance, making him a very good, as said earlier on, and remains that way for most of the game. So now that we've gone over Edgar's overall starting stats and overview, let's go ahead and go over his tools. Most of his tools will be on the inventory through items list. And you can collect mobile tools, but as long as you have at least one copy in your inventory, Edgar will be able to use the tool command and use that regardless. So each tool functions most differently than the others. Most will deal physical damage, whereas some will deal debuffing, and then there's 2 that inflict magical base damage, and one tool in particular allows him to alter enemies' weaknesses, which is pretty interesting. So anyway, one thing to keep in mind is that all of Edgar's tools, like Sabin's blitzes, are unblockable, and the ones that do multi-target ignore split damage. So that'll save me some time explaining those. So Edgar's auto crossbow is the first tool you'll get. Ironically, you'll get that free when you talk to Edgar the first time at Figaro Castle in the World of Balance. This is automatically applied to your inventory. This allows Edgar to deal physical damage to all enemies on the battlefield, and it has a battle power of 125. This actually makes Edgar a pretty good clean sweeper earlier on, thanks to this tool, but unfortunately as you progress further into World of Balance and into World of Ruin, auto crossbow just does not clean sweep all the enemies like it would normally do early in the game, but it's still a very reliable tool to utilize if you're going down the strength route, and stays that way for most of the game. Noise Blaster is probably the second tool that you'll acquire right off the gate, right after you talk with Edgar, when you go into the tool shop at Figaro Castle and purchase it there. This tool does not deal any damage, but it inflicts the debuff Confuse on enemies, on all opponents. It does have a 100% success rate, but it will fail against enemies that are immune to confusion. This is actually a pretty useful tool earlier on, when there's not many enemies that are immune to confuse, but eventually it will start losing its potency by the time you start going further into the game and more enemies start resisting confuse. But it's still a very good tool to have. Though I would strongly recommend giving Edgar the Peace Ring or Ribbon just to make sure he doesn't get confused, because if he uses Noise Blaster when he's confused and your party does not have any protection against confuse, they will all get confused, and I've had party wipes that ended up resulting as a result of this mistake. So be sure to have protection when you're planning to have Noise Blaster in the inventory. Bioblaster is your third tool that you'll acquire. This can be acquired right after talking with Edgar and going to the tool shop in Figaro Castle. This allows you to inflict poison-based damage on enemies and inflicts poison on targets. It has a spell power of 20. So, unfortunately, as far as my knowledge goes, a large amount of the enemies in Final Fantasy VI that are actually susceptible to poison are humanoid enemies. Unfortunately, there are a few exceptions, like for the for certain human enemies, but a large amount of them are susceptible to poison. Humabah is also a noble monster that's also vulnerable to poison, and even Demon in Kafka's Tower, which is one of the Warring Triad, is also susceptible to poison as well. But a large amount of enemies are capable of absorbing poison, and that just heals them rather than damaging them. So, unfortunately, this is a very good early game. It does have, it does give Edgar his early magic dealing damage for the time being, but a large amount of enemies in this game will absorb poison and just heals them instead. So, it's good for early use, but just falls off later on, just like Noise Blaster. Flash is also Edgar's second tool that allows him to deal multi-damage. This is also ignores splits damage like Bioblaster and does, and it's unblockable. And basically when it's used, it deals non-elemental magic damage to enemies. And thanks to the fact that the evade bug glitch is fixed in most versions after the original, this also inflicts darkness on enemies and has a spell power of 42, which is pretty much the same spell power that Saban's Rising Phoenix has. So this is actually a very good tool to have if you bring Edgar with you to the Metrotech Factory and facility, as many enemies are actually strong against physical attacks. And Flash is very useful against enemies that have very high physical defense in general. But unfortunately, its ability to inflict darkness will kind of become a novelty, since many enemies will have resistance against that later on. And of course, it won't be used to clean sweepable enemies like Crossbow, but it's still serviceable as long as you keep Edgar's magic stat up to date. Drill is one of Edgar's best tools in the entire game, the other being Chainsaw, and this is because this allows you to single target enemies for very high physical damage. This deals physical damage and has a battle power of 191. And of course it ignores defense, of course, so this also makes it a very reliable tool. So if you're wondering why this is actually used more than Chainsaw, we'll get to that in a minute. But the fact that it doesn't have any added gimmicks allows Edgar to deal pretty much high flat physical damage overall and disregards enemy defense, which makes it a very reliable tool, and you should be using this whenever you use Edgar. Chainsaw is also Edgar's next best tool. In comparison to the drill, it's actually more stronger, but it's actually due to one of the gimmicks it has. It makes it not a very reliable tool to utilize in boss fights, but it's still a very handy tool for combat nevertheless. It deals physical damage, deals a battle power of 252, and like Drill is unblockable and ignores defense. It does, however, have a 25% chance of inflicting death on enemies, which unfortunately a large amount of the enemies later in the game do have high resistance against instant death attacks. Ironically enough, this can also work against undead enemies, so this will destroy them regardless of their protection against instant death, but it still fails against enemies that are actually immune to death. If you try to use this in the Pixel Remaster version, which I'm playing, if he tries for the instant death attack, it will result in a miss. If you play older versions, you'll see Edgar try to go for the instant death attack and primarily miss. But it's still one of Edgar's high damaging tools, but it's just not a very reliable tool against bosses. Let's just put it that way. Debilitator is Edgar's second tool. Oh yeah, before I go to Debilitator, to get Chainsaw, you do need to solve the clock puzzle at Zozo, which is the solution is 6 hours, 10 minutes, and 50 seconds. And if you're wondering where to get Drill and Flash, you can purchase these at Figaro Tool Shop, Castle's Tool Shop, right after you beat Kefka at the Invasion of Narsh scene. My apologies for forgetting to mention that, by the way. So, Debilitator is actually very weird because you normally would purchase this in World of Ruin through the Figaro Castle's Tool Shop. after you get Edgar back on board and the castle resurfaces. But you can get this early in the World of Balance through 2 bosses that have a rare chance for stealing. Those being the Right Crane, which is a rare steal, and Missile Bay from Air Force, which is also a rare steal. There's also another enemy in World of Ruin that also has a steal for Debilitator as well, which is a weapon armor carrier. And basically what this tool does is that it inflicts one of the 8 elemental weaknesses on enemy targets, and this is also unblockable. So this is actually a very good tool to have against enemies that are not don't have any elemental weaknesses that you can exploit. I think if you could override elemental weaknesses, it is possible, but I'm not positive. If anyone has tried to experiment with that, please let me know in the comments, because this video will be exported over to YouTube once it gets done here. But overall, this is actually a very good tool, but against bosses that are not don't have any elemental weaknesses. Very good, useful against Ultimate Weapon near the end of World of Balance, but unfortunately, because of the fact many enemies will have some weaknesses, this makes it, or protection against elements, this actually is a very difficult tool to use properly. But if you have the corresponding elements to use, this is actually very good. Especially since most of your spells earlier on are going to be Fire, Ice, Lightning, and Poison. That really works, but getting access to Wind, Water, Earth, and Holy is going to be a lot more difficult until World of Ruin, when you start getting access to more of those abilities or spells for those elements. There are some party members that do utilize Holy, Wind, or Water for damage, but Earth is very hard to acquire. Air Anchor is probably the last tool you'll get. This can be found in a treasure chest in the Cultix Tower, but you need to find the hidden treasure room first. You can easily find a hidden switch next to the first chest in the first treasure room in the tower, and once you activate it, go down 1 flight down and you'll find the room that wasn't present there to get the Air Anchor. You can raise your Jinjai armor to get this as well at the Dragonet Coliseum, but this is actually more better to get it through the Cultist Tower instead. Air Anchor is very unique. This is actually the tool that inflicts heat status on enemies. This is actually the first game in the series that inflicts heat, which means that when a target gets inflicted with heat, the next attack or action they take, except running away, will cause them to suffer instant death. This, of course, will fail against any enemies that are protected against instant death. And this tool is actually, the heat status is actually a homage to Hoto no Ken as well, because it's based off of one of Kenshiro's attacks that he does on one of the Fang Clan members. I won't go into full detail for that, by the way, because that won't be mentioned, but it definitely does draw its reference from Hoto no Ken, by the way. So anyway, that covers pretty much all of Edgar's tools. So, of course, with status, you do want to prioritize building up Edgar's strength. It's not a bad idea to give him some points towards his agility, which is very nice to have in terms of speed. Stamina, you don't really need to do much unless you want him to have more resistance against instant death attacks. Of course, magic might not be a bad idea to build up since it's very subpar, and you'll probably want that for not only his spells, but for flash and bioblaster damage as well. But technically, strength should get the higher priority for the most part. Now, for endgame equipment, I don't really have the most recommended stuff. I do have Radiant Lance, which is probably one of his more better options for a good weapon if you're not going for Ragnarok Sword or even Illumini. I don't know if this steel deals 3 times damage on jump, but it does give him a +3 on strength boost, not to mention it gives him a +3 on magic and a +2 on agility, which is very nice to have. Now, of course, I don't really have Regal Crown because I did razor that for a Jinjai helm. But if you do want him to have more stats through helmets, the Regal Crown gives him +1 on all stats. And it's actually one of the 2 gears that he and Sabin could equip. But technically, it's probably one of his better options for stat boosting. Of course, if you do have spare red jackets, you should probably give him that or Jinjai armor. Both of those give him +5 on strength. Of course, Jinjai armor has better stat boost boost than Red Jacket, because Red Jacket only gives like +1 on magic, whereas you get +3 with Jinjai armor. But if you're not willing to take a chance of farming for Thunder Shields to wager at the Dragonet Coliseum, the Red Jacket might be another better option. If you do get a Bone Club through Dragonet Coliseum betting, as well as wager that and succeed in getting a Red Jacket might be another better option. Unlike Jinjai Helm, it does give Edgar an additional protection against fire damage, because they'll negate it. But if you want more stats than the +5 on the Red Jacket, the Jinjai armor will give him some more better defenses and some more better stat gains on other areas. But Red Jacket's not a bad option if you want to limit down the amount of farming for Jinjai armor. But Jinjai armor might be better if you're into defense and more better stat options. Force armor and force shield are also very good options for Edgar if you want to build up his magic defense and evasion. Of course, when it comes to shields, he can equip mostly heavy gear, but he can definitely equip. It's probably best to give him either the Jinjai, either give him the Aegis shield, Jinjai shield, or even the Paladin shield if you want him to have protection against ailments and whatnot. Of course, he can also go with Thunder, Flame, and Ice shields, or even Force shield, if you so wish. Now, for relics, the Gigas Glove should definitely be his primary aim for protection. I do not know if Hero Ring and Gigas Glove stack in general, but I do know 2 Hero Rings will not work in this matter. So you can give him a Gigas Glove or Hero Ring. Since he can equip lances, giving him the Dragon Boots and Dragon Horn might be also another good option for him. And of course, I did mention if you don't want to go take that route and give him the Radiant Lance, you can also give him the Ragnarok Sword if you want to turn the Ragnarok Esper into the sword, or if you want to get the Illumini sword, that's also a good option for him. And Ultimate Weapon is also good if you do want to get him Red Cap instead to give him more oomph with his attacks, with physical attacks with Ultimate Weapon. That's also another good option, because he can definitely equip that as well. So that's pretty much basically all that there is to utilize with Edgar. There are better options than what I've listed, but this guy is, after all, tailored for beginners, and you don't have to take my advice for it. Just choose whatever you want to do with the character and go with that. This guide is, of course, meant for to help anyone that wants to get into Final Fantasy VI, so that way I'm just contributing my experience and knowledge on the game to others that will need it. That will conclude this guide for now. I think I'll cover Umaro next, being one of our 2 secret characters for this game for the most part. So if you enjoy these guides and the content I do on my Twitch and YouTube channel, I recommend subbing to both my YouTube and Twitch channels. That would definitely help, or even follow my Twitch channel if you so wish. I do mostly speedruns as well as casual plays, and I do love playing RPGs, especially Final Fantasy VI. So if you love Final Fantasy VI, please follow me on both of those accounts. I will be trying to put out guides to help players out, but there are other people that do a way better job than I do in describing things. So if you want more stuff on that, I recommend checking those out too, because any knowledge is definitely well worth using and helping others in general. Anyway, this is going to be it for me today. I will see you all later tonight for Final Fantasy X, and my next guy will be Umaro. I'll try to have that up tomorrow as well. This is Rotor Storm 331 signing off. Have a great day. Take care, and I will see you all next time. Be on the lookout for this guide coming to YouTube once I get through highlighting and exporting it to YouTube. So have a great day.